isn't it kind of a, I mean, I have two questions. First, about the skilled labor. Isn't it kind of a chicken or an egg situation? Because if you don't have the jobs for people to graduate from trade school and to have these like high skilled manufacturing jobs because they are currently in China, at like, is there going to be like, it feels like you can't have investment in only skilled workforce if there's no jobs for them when they come out.
Well,
Uh,
there are lots of jobs. I haven't looked at the most recent job openings report. I think it's the JOLTS report that the government puts out. But the last time I looked, there were something like 500,000 open manufacturing jobs. So com- companies looking to hire people with specific manufacturing skills. Some are high skill, tool maker, welder, precision machinist, and others are low skill because there's always going to be some low skilled people in a company. But there's no question that the jobs are there. One of the reasons it's been hard to recruit in the past has been offshoring, because if you imagine you're in a small town and you're looking around, getting ready to graduate from high school, you're thinking about what to do, and a couple of years ago, your uncle lost his job at the mill, at the factory, and he's working at Walmart or something as a greeter, and because there's no more manufacturing jobs. You say, why would I want to go into manufacturing if there's not going to be any jobs here for me after I get trained? Which is sort of what you're asking. And we say that by promoting reshoring, by letting the guidance counselor know how well manufacturing is doing, that work's coming back, no longer going offshore, that it'll be easier for the guidance counselor to say, yeah, Susie, if you want to become a welder, become a welder. That's a great career once again. We see that it's coming back.
how long would you estimate that process of reshoring is going to take? Because when you talked about the reason that these factories are in China, like not just the skilled labor, but also the machines, the automation, those things. I remember reading about entire industries in the US that it is very hard to get back because, they sold all their machines back in the 90s when they offshored.
Well, we don't want those old machines from the 90s. We want new machines because you need new machines to be productive and competitive, especially if you have high wage rates. But so this gives you a perspective of what has happened, which is, the history is always a good preamble for the future. And so you can see that when I founded the Reshoring Initiative in 2010, in that year we identified about 6,000 jobs being announced, a combination of reshoring by U.S. companies, think General Motors, Ford, GE, or FDI, foreign direct investment, so Siemens, Toyota, foreign headquartered companies bringing jobs to the U.S. So the combination of the two, about 6,000 jobs. The trend did very nicely, went up, peaked in 2017 with the Trump tax and regulatory cuts, fell off with the trade wars, and then picked up very nicely under COVID as companies saw that they could not depend on getting product from offshore the way they had been depending. And so and then last year it hit a peak of 350,000 jobs being announced coming back, significantly enhanced by the CHIPS Act and the IRA. So the chip factories and the EV battery factories, plus other miscellaneous products that were included, has been a significant portion of the last 2 years of rise there. So right now it looks to us like 300,000 a year or so is a good number. We can't do much more than that because at the moment we don't have the people, we don't have the factories. But you can get factories. You can build a decent factory in a year or two. You can get all kinds of machine tools and other kinds of capital equipment in a year, typically. The problem is the people. The biggest problem is convincing the high schools to go from measuring their success based on the percentage of their kids that go on to university to rather measuring their success on the lifetime income and the lifetime job satisfaction of the people that they graduate. And they don't do that. But they're starting to. We see manufacturing programs starting up at high schools and community colleges around the country, and specifically the government to enable these chip and EV battery factories has been subsidizing the local community colleges, universities, high schools to develop training programs to provide the workers needed for these new facilities. So there's lots of positive sign that it's happening, but it's taken us, like when I first started working when I was in high school, and this was back in the 50s, so long time ago. Okay, I worked for Singer Sewing Machine, the big sewing machine company, at their main factory, and the engineers there laughed at the Japanese products that were coming in because they were so simple and so primitive, and eventually Japan took over the industry, and so it's taken from, say, from the 50s and the 60s till now, so 60 years for the U.S. to lose its place, for the U.S. manufacturing to decline, and it's going to take certainly 20 or 30 years to rebuild. It's not going to happen this year. It's not going to completely happen this decade, but I'd be delighted if I could be sure that it would happen in the next 15 years. I'd be delighted.
I mean, one of the things that you talk about all these jobs coming back. I remember during COVID, like one of the things that I thought was going to happen immediately is manufacturing coming back, but it didn't seem to do it at the pace that I thought it was. And your data is showing that there's 300,000 new jobs announced, but like aren't other jobs also leaving at the same time and going to like Vietnam, Malaysia, et cetera, India?
Not so much. Let me see if I included this. If you look at the trend in U.S. Manufacturing employment data put out by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, we've had this steady decline that it started 30 years ago, roughly 40 years ago, and coming down like this, and then starting in 2010, it's gone up gradually like this. Almost every year, a slight increase. So it's gone up by a million or a million and a half since that in that time. Completely up. We've gone from this to that. Okay, and the reason for that significant increase is that in those earlier years, in that previous 10 years, we were offshoring. Work was flowing out of the U.S. to China, flowing out to all kinds of countries around the world, but especially China. And now for the last 10, 12, 13 years, that rate of offshoring has declined dramatically, and the rate of reshoring and FDI has gone from almost nothing, like the 6,000 a year, up to the 300,000 or so a year. So, for example, if I had the chart, it shows that if we had continued on this downward trend to today, we would today have 6 million fewer manufacturing jobs than we actually do. So there's been a dramatic reversal in the trend. So I'm delighted. Another chart that I have shows the mix of goods consumption and services consumption in the U.S. And I think one of you mentioned that we're a service economy, not a manufacturing economy. And the other chart shows that balance. We had these two trends: service going up and goods going down. And now the last 12 years, the two are stable. So the goods consumption as a percentage of consumer purchases has stabilized for the last 13 years. And as I achieve my objectives and U.S. manufacturing goes up by 40%, that difference between services and goods will shrink, and people will no longer say this is a service economy. They'll say this is a service and manufacturing economy, which is a much more stable condition for the country.
Are there specific industries, because we've been talking about manufacturing kind of in general, are there specific industries that you see driving this trend of reshoring more than others?
Okay. There's sort of two time periods for that. For the first 10 years that we tracked, it was clearly transportation equipment, which is primarily cars, was by far the biggest driver. It's a huge industry, and the foreign companies especially were putting all kinds of factories into the Southeast and Texas to increase their share of the U.S. market. Toyota, all these companies, and so that was clearly the strongest part of this. Now the last 2 years, with the IRA and the CHIPS Act, with the government pumping hundreds of billions of dollars into into reshoring, and to bring these new industries back to the U.S. Now the about 50% of the jobs announced in the last 2 years have been either chips or EV batteries.